Jack, hi, and thank you so much for joining me for a discussion on Faces of Digital Health to talk about human performance, longevity, increasing health span, your passion for art, medicine, and entrepreneurship. I want to start with a definition of human performance medicine, because the immediate association when you say those words is athletes, people that spend a lot of time doing sports. So how would you define the field and how does it relate to the everyday individual?
Human performance is a whole science of its own. It's very rarely combined with what we do in fixing people who've got medical problems. So really, it's best to sort of think about what human performance science is first, and then think about what performance medicine might be. So human
Mm-hmm.
performance science has is now probably six enough decades old. It is the science of looking at human physiology, especially in extreme environments, trying to see who survives and thrives in things like high altitude environments, in extreme military settings, in uh, hyper endurance expedition type environments, and anyone that's kind of living in extremes. So you need human performance science to basically push human bodies to not only just achieve what they need, but actually survive the task ahead. And obviously, that's been in the military settings and expedition settings, elite sport, obviously, Formula One, space travel, astronauts, etc. NASA have been working on human performance science for ages, and it's really been kind of only for those people who are already pretty damn fit. You got your Premiership footballers and this kind of thing. So, what is performance medicine then? Well, it's actually a relatively undefined uh, term, but for us it has always been the combination of what makes for really good foundational health, wellness, and medicine, team-based usually, with the very, very best of human performance science. And so performance medicine is what can we learn from elite performance science to not only help people who are trying to do the stuff on the edge of human capability, but how can we get people from the edge of disaster in extremely critical situations? How can we help people get through intensive care settings? How do we get people to get through surgery they otherwise would die from? And I guess now, for most of us, like hopefully you and me, Staza, how do people like you and me do the seemingly impossible, which is be working extraordinarily hard and into our 90s, possibly not through vanity, but through necessity, as we need to do more with our lives for longer. So that's kind of what performance medicine is. It's really kind of joining together the worlds of really great dealing with disease type medicine and the science of human performance.
Is it possible to assess to which extent is this still in very early stages of research, and to which extent is this translated into medical practice? For example, can you mention what's been done in oncology based on this knowledge for patients
Yeah,
undergoing
so
treatments?
the words that are used for this kind of application of health optimization, human performance science in medicine are prehabilitation. So there is prehab for in specifically the question you asked about cancer, big operations or prehabilitating for major rounds of chemotherapy, for instance. Very well studied. It is sadly not particularly well practiced, but certainly very well studied, that if you put people through hormetic stress, just like you would in for an athlete, um, prior to major surgery, prior to chemotherapy, you get better outcomes. You get people fitter physiologically, cardiometabolically, from a cellular level fitness as well as a systemic fitness level, and people
Mhm.
have fewer side effects. People live longer. In fact, one of the greatest indicators of survival in cancer is called the Karnofsky Performance Scale, which is essentially a performance scale. It's actually called a performance scale. So we're using an actual word here, and it's not to do with how fast you're running for the for the bus. It is essentially the performance of how independent you are as a physiological body. So are you able to do all of your normal stuff that you would normally do? It's slightly odd because it's age adjusted, but essentially it's what would you normally be doing?
Hmm.
And that's 10 out of 10. And do you need other people to help you get out of bed because you are really very unwell? And that's like 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10. And that maps incredibly well to survivorship in cancer, even despite the fact that there are particular mutations in cancers and so forth. Your overall cellular level, right through to systemic physiological performance, is your one of your greatest indicators for survival and just feeling okay and
Hmm.
having good quality of life as best possible through tough tough illness like hard to treat cancers. So that's that example. Of course, we know in major surgery that your VO2, or actually more importantly, the thing which no one really talks about, which is your lactate threshold, or maybe anaerobic threshold, to a slightly different, but broadly speaking the same, are the things that you get tested when you are in a physiology lab with a VO2 max or a CPEX test, a cardiopulmonary exercise test, either called a CPEX or a CPET test. And the numbers, the actual numbers, it's not like 1 to 10, but the actual numbers that get spat out of that test, including this legendary VO2 max number and all the other hyper important numbers that come out, are also very, very determinant whether you'll end up either dead from this particular procedure or in intensive care, or whether you'll go to a normal ward, what the
So
complication rate may be.
when you do those measurements, what happens next? Like, does a doctor decide not to operate on a specific patient? Does a patient need to undergo specific training in order to be
Yeah,
physically fit before the procedure? What
yeah.
happens if the person is not strong enough? If you have somebody that's in constant pain and can't do, I don't know, a jog or a run,
Yeah.
can you talk a bit about that? So measurements are absolutely fascinating, especially
Measurements are
for
great. They give
statistics.
they give you they give you warnings whether you need to book an intensive care bed. It might mean that your operation's longer. But more importantly, it's like, okay, we've got the number. Are you? I mean, our view is this: whatever the incidents, whatever the issue is, you want to reduce the incidence of the patients ending up in ICU. It's not just, okay, we know you're going to go to ICU, but can we actually even avoid you ending up in the ICU? And so, yeah, if you're capable of training, then you train. And it actually it's funny because you get the greatest gains for the people that are least fit, which is kind of obvious, but like even in a matter of a couple of weeks, which you can usually, even in non-elective surgery, a surgery that's really important to get on with, you can usually wait a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. The advantages of not having so many complications and having a better recovery usually outweigh the difference between doing something tomorrow and waiting a couple of weeks to operate or to start the treatment process. And if you're really unfit and you're so unable to do anything, I mean, sometimes you have to take the risk and book the book the bed because that you're going to be filling in intensive care, right? But at least you go in eyes wide open, knowing that that's the case. But
Hmm.
the the modalities, you'd be really surprised at what you can do, even with people that are not ambulatory. There are even cute ways of improving cardiovascular output, cardiorespiratory output to stress the system. For instance, there are these um, hypoxic, hyperoxic. So you kind of fluctuate from low oxygen, so you simulate altitude and then you come back down in the course of the hour's training process. And so you kind of cycle through hypoxia to hyperoxia,
Mm-hmm.
both of which have a kind of a stress effect on your body. And your heart rate goes up as if you were exercising. Saunas can do the same thing too. Not very well studied, but ways of getting your heart and whole cardiorespiratory system to get fitter is what you want. Ideally, also, you want a reserve of muscle mass. Now, if you can't put on muscle in that time period, you're going to have to think about what reserves you've got. But of course, your actual muscle mass reserve is important too, because that does
Mm-hmm.
get used up when you're kind of, uh, yeah, when the treatment or the intensive care that you're getting means that you can't move. You
Yeah.
usually can't get enough protein from your ingestion.
I came across one interesting term when I was reading about this field, and that's metabolic flexibility. And I love
Yeah,
new words. So, what
that
is
is
it?
that's slightly different. So metabolic flexibility is a little bit like um, it does again come from performance science because you need to be able to burn both types of fuels. You need to be able to burn fats and you need to be able to utilize sugars in the most efficient way. But usually you don't want to be using sugars until you really need to. Then when you need to, you've got to use them immensely well and efficiently to produce maximum energy. But I mean, as you know very well, I hope many of your listeners may know as well, when we're sitting around like now chatting, our muscles are not really doing a lot. My jaws may be doing some stuff, but I'm sitting on my butt and I don't need to use glucose. Only my brain probably, but like and heart. But apart from that, I don't need to use sugars. Um, and then I start moving, and I start exercising, or I'm experiencing the stress of an operation or some kind of uh, I'm having a fever because I've got a really bad chest infection, et cetera, et cetera. And so my system starts to get under stress. So let's call that work. So that work um, first uses up fats in aerobic metabolism, and it produces an awful lot of energy for each gram fat. Yeah. And you want to be doing that for as long as you can as the energy ramps up. But there comes a point at which whatever component of the system is limited, and you can no longer deliver oxygen fast enough into the cells to be able to do that work aerobically. And you start doing it saying, okay, well, the oxygen's going to come and we're going to get some of it, but we're not going to get enough of it. So you also start using glucose to do the work as well anaerobically. Sorry, I
Mm-hmm.
do apologize. You're doing it both aerobically and anaerobically. It's not like you flip from aerobic to anaerobic, but it's a mixed picture. But we call that like the anaerobic threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And the flexibility comes where you kind of end up having a choice. You find it very easy to engage that ultra hard work, sprinting type, uh, heavy lifting type, high intensity hit, re-hit, whatever type training that you're doing, which you definitely need glucose for. You can't do it without glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just can't do that very well, and therefore they get exhausted really quickly. But you also need the flexibility to burn fats for as long and as much as humanly possible without having to tap into the anaerobic metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
And so the flexibility really is both sides. People who only train um, in burning fats can sometimes not be very good at burning sugars. And so whenever sugars are introduced, they're suddenly like, what is this stuff? Where
Yeah.
do I put it? And, you know, people like on long-term ketogenic diets, for instance, um, they can sometimes get quite big spikes in glucose and insulin when they take a lot of carbs and sugars because they're just not used to dealing with it. So the ideal really is that you're not only used to at taking it on and storing it right, but you're also very, very good at turning on the usage of fats and sugars um, quickly for the right purpose. That's being flexible there is what you want. You don't want to just have one or the other, and equally you don't want to be bad at both. So
Yeah.
super unfit people, they're suddenly like, oh, I need sugars straight away. And so they start mobilizing glycogen from the liver, and they start they just stop using their fats
Mm-hmm.
very, very early on, and that reliance on kind of the spiky kind of glucose-driven metabolism is means that you don't cycle through fats and you accumulate them. So yeah,
Yeah. It sounds quite a lot as the conclusion that we often come to when it comes to, healthy lifestyles, and that is to be moderate in everything, in
right,
either running, also building muscle mass, eating well, making sure you sleep enough, making sure you have a solid mental health,
yeah,
not too much of anything. Like anything can be a problem if you consume too much of it, and that goes to fat, that goes to sugar. So um it's like, how do you see the current public perception on what one should do?
yeah.
Yes.
Well, look, I mean, every good wealth manager has a portfolio. Okay, I slightly disagree with the concept of moderate everything.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I slightly more kind of go for you've got to be fit for purpose. That's what fitness really means. You know, a fit is the fit, right? Fitness is the fact that, this is the thing I need to try and get a grip of, and this is my grip, and my grip has got to, the thing's got to fit, right? So in the very, very basic terms, public health messaging, in order to achieve physiological fitness and health, it's kind of have a varied mixed diet. Make sure it's got lots of this and lots of that and less of this and less of that. Your fridge should be wonderfully colorful. It should have a larger deposit of vegetables in it than the meat shelf, and the meat shelf should be smaller than the fish shelf. I'm being very basic here, okay?
Yeah,
But
yeah, 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 yeah.
like if you're giving out public health messages, they've got to be three things. They've got to be universally understandable. They've got to be generally good for the majority, and they've got to be affordable. Okay, those are
Mm-hmm.
the three things. So yeah, a bit of this, a bit of that, and moderate everything. But maybe if you're aiming to get fit, be fit for a very specific purpose, you've got to overtrain. You've got to be over provision for certain things. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
a bodybuilder, their fridge does not look like your or my fridge. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely,
So let's face it,
absolutely.
that's the reality of it. And an astronaut, like let's face it, not everything is kind of standard living and public health advice. So there's nothing wrong with public health advice. In fact, it's the right thing. But there are things that you can do which personalize for what you're trying to be fit for,
Mm-hmm.
what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are. And for that, you can tweak those things. And of course, then also, not everybody is a standard, normal, blended human. We're not 7, 8 billion human beings put into a smoothie mixer and come out as a thing that you. I mean, you and I are different.
Yeah.
Your hair color is different to mine. That's probably reflecting something genetically, epigenetically, that means that perhaps you need less sunlight to produce the same amount of vitamin D, for instance. And maybe my vitamin D, which it always is in winter, is catastrophically low. So if I'm just having a mixture of everything, it's not going to work. You've got to be able to
Yeah,
test
I
certain
see.
things
I
and
see what you mean.
go again.
I see what you mean. Yeah, we definitely need to take into account the personal specifics of each individual to kind
Right.
of get to the optimal state of each individual, which is different for everyone.
Sure.
Um, you also have a program for founders that is trying to prepare them for their optimal performance and improve their health. Can you talk a little bit about that? And in the whole discussion of measuring different things, trying to optimize different things in human performance. Where does technology come in? What do you use? What do you measure? Um, it's a huge question, I know.
It's a multiple,
So
but
try to stay on the high
yeah,
level.
it's a fun story, the Founders Health Program. So obviously, I have a longer history in technology and startups than I do even in medicine and performance science. So like, I, I ended up by hook or by crook being a venture partner at Mosaic Ventures, a really great kind of Series A fund in London. Does a lot of great stuff in tech, and didn't really have a great deep understanding of the health tech side of things. So around 2017, 2018, whilst I was a venture partner there at Mosaic, we kind of in parallel started to think about, okay, maybe we could do some of our really bespoke health performance optimization, so-called longevity research stuff that we were doing, really bespoke. Could we do this like cheaply for founders, because they don't have tens of thousands of dollars to do this stuff. They don't have the time either, let's face it. And so we worked on a program, we designed it. This was back in 2018, 2019. And then we asked like 100 founders if they would be cool with this program. And it was really funny. Pre-COVID, they said no. They said, actually, if we kind of asked for this and said we really need it, can we put whatever amount of money towards this for our own health performance, and maybe it'll help our companies as well. People would run for the hills if they were seen to be like not bulletproof and completely honest
Mm.
mentally and physically. And so we kind of
So
throw.
the no came out of fear of transparency and maybe kind of unveiling
Yeah,
some vulnerabilities.
yeah, exactly. It was very much if our team and our board and our investors and whatnot didn't think that we were these like archetypal bulldozer, ballsy, hyper energy, can work through the night, whatever it is, type folk, then people may run for the hills. They may think we're getting weak.
Hmm.
That's broadly speaking it, and doesn't really get helped by the fact that that expectation sits within the people investing in them as well, at least until COVID. And then weird things happen in COVID. So, even though we had our practice, most of our work was largely speaking flipped into dealing with COVID stuff, treating it, avoiding it, helping people get to weddings in different countries, whatever it was. And also, I was, appointed as a clinical research fellow at Imperial to kind of do cool computational modeling work. And so, like, we didn't really think about the Founders Health Program for a little while. We were thinking about, was the world going to end? And
Yeah.
for a little bit, and then the world isn't ending, so how do we sort of get back to work? But in that time, a few really interesting things happened. But at the kind of around 2020, end of 21, 2022, people started saying, actually, this thing that you were talking about, this founders health thing, this is quite cool. Actually, people, even our investors are saying that we should maybe think about stuff. But what happened in COVID was really weird. Mental health became a thing. I mean, like everyone knew mental health was mental health. I have the great privilege of being able to say that I was the first advisor at Headspace. So back in the day, things like mental health were known to folk like me, but not really recognized as a thing.
Hmm.
Became huge public awareness on that front. The second one was just the general vulnerability that you might physically die by catching something. And funnily enough, the young people that were getting really sick with COVID were the ones that were metabolically unfit. They had high insulin levels. You also got people that were very, very fit that were immunocompromised going into hospital too. And guess what? the VCs who are getting up at 6 in the morning and cycling before they get to work and doing all the weights and everything, that some of them got really, really ill as well because, they were. But in any case, for whatever the reason, they ended up realizing that life can be short. That vulnerability with the mental health vulnerability aspects as well came to the fore. Other cool things happened too. In COVID, we got used to testing ourselves. Do you remember sticking stuff up your nose like every?
Absolutely.
How does your nose feel about that?
Not
um,
fun.
Not fun. But you know what was really cool is that we got used to doing testing properly ourselves. That has never happened in my lifetime. If you're a
Hmm.
diabetic, sure. If you're
Yeah,
an
yeah.
independent diabetic, sure. But for most of us, taking responsibility to do something well enough to send to a lab was not a thing
Hmm.
until COVID. So self-testing and that kind of like, oh, it's actually got a name. It's called SDH, self-directed healthcare. It's kind of, you're taking clinical grade stuff into your own hands. And third thing that happened, which was also, I think, mega interesting, was the rise in quantitative self stuff. People were putting on Aura rings. People, a little related to the self-testing thing, but batteries suddenly got a lot better in that time period. The apps and stuff got better. Um, uh, Remote testing, self-testing, remote monitoring, data, not having to go to a physical lab to get something done, for you to be able to pinprick something at home or measure something on your aura, or the glucometry stuff became a big thing.
Hmm.
I mean, think about it. Pooping into a pot, or getting the poop into a pot, for the most unbelievably advanced genomic testing of the different species of bugs in your gut. Imagine that 50 years ago, 30, 40, 20, even 10 years ago. It just wasn't a thing. It
Hmm.
all inflected around the same point. And the last part, which I think is also critically important, is the fact that what with all of these things together, people were happy to start experimenting more with themselves. Now, I'd say this very carefully. This is not exactly the same. It's very highly related to the biohacking movement that's been around for a long time. But self experimentation was hugely increased during COVID. People would start to buy drugs off the internet that they thought might help them. People thought that, by taking cool combinations of stuff they heard Trump talk about, or or they got, by reading papers and things like that to help them recover or protect themselves from COVID. Um, these things really, really started, and what resulted is that biohacking, self experimentation, self directed healthcare, and also the kind of the movement around a lot of the Hubermans, the Atirs, the Sinclairs, the people with big voices of varying scientific and medical quality, but some brilliant and some, I would say, variable, questionable. But the point is, the entire world started listening on podcasts to these people who no longer were seeing people physically. And so how did they get their message out? They
Hmm.
started podcasts. And these five main domains happened and created a complete sea change globally in how people perceive their own health and how they direct their own health, and how they realize that basically preventive health and performance science can actually help them get through potentially fatal things and, deadly
Hmm.
pandemics. Didn't end up being that bad, but these matters are not trivial. And when a
Absolutely.
nexus happens, people shift. And so, going back to the Founders Health Program, everyone was aware that doing cool stuff for your health is cool. It just flipped overnight. And so, Balderton Capital, Mosaic, Mosaic was the very, very first. They actually helped us prototype it, and then Balderton brilliantly led by some amazing people there, but specifically one of the partners there, Daniel Waterhouse, um, really like stuck their neck out and said, okay, this isn't an option for people. We do health optimization, human performance science stuff in every other major high stress industry. Why don't we do it in startups? Why don't we do it in venture? It's the most stressful of it's one of the most stressful environments to work in ever, and we know from science that it works well.
Hmm.
So why on earth don't we do it in this domain? It's kind of like it it changed, and
Yeah.
so we got a huge number of people wanting to do it. Um, it's it's very, very hard to do it economically. It's very hard to do it feasibly at the
What
price
do
that's.
people need to do?
I'll
What do
go
people
into
need
what
to
the
do?
program is for sure, but
And
it's a kind of a 6 month program rather than an ongoing membership, which is what we normally do. And but we give everybody a minimal viable dose of all the things that we do ongoing for people to keep them kicking ass until they're 90. But we want them to really get into their DNA early as leaders, what to do. And you have a performance medicine deep dive with a physiology trained MD, so either sports science or military background doctor. Same thing as we do in our concierge side. We do a limited but still very comprehensive set of medical and performance related blood work, physiology testing in a laboratory, or remote proxies for that for people that can't come to any of the labs in various metropolitan centers. We do continuous glucose monitoring. We do aura rings, but all in a fun way that is not massively time consuming. It's cute.
hmm
It's fun. We get the data. We in the back office do the hard work of interpreting it, come up with a plan, and then there is sort of an overall functional medicine coaching, which is sleep, stress, nutrition, generally how to just recognize the difference between a carrot and a Mars bar, kind of, the real basics. There's physiology training, which is to do with your physical health. And then there's elite performance coaching, which is actually to do with your mind. It's not the same as executive coaching. Elite performance coaches are either military or elite sport coaches who teach individuals and teams how to perform well under extraordinary pressures and how to stay healthy
hmm
and not get sick. And that carries on for 6 months with a break halfway to see what to specialize in. And at the end, we retest everything: body comp, musculoskeletal system, CPET testing for the VO2 max, bloods again. We do all of that because we want to know personally, have we made a difference?
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be doing it. It's a not-for-profit exercise for us. So we wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't making a difference.
hmm
Done about 250 founders now, and the results are absolutely as you'd expect them to be, because we know that such programs have outstanding efficacy in other domains such as military and elite sport and expeditions leadership. Same things happened. People have had a great time, they've enjoyed it, not too much time out of their day, and affordable, and it yields results. So yeah, so far so good.
Um, Several questions there. I first want to go back to when you were talking about the mindset shift that happened during COVID and how
Yeah,
people started to self-experiment. I think the huge factor there was also fear.
yeah,
I think that, and that's just based on what I see with chronic patients, people start caring either due to fear or either due to pain. So, to which extent do you think that now that the fear is gone, that what happened to that momentum now that the fear is gone?
um well, I think the afterglow, and I don't know how long it's going to last for, but I suspect it's reasonably long. The afterglow of the fear, if you like, is going to exist in the sort of the realm of aspiration for longer health. It's less about the fear of getting a virus, but it's more about the aspiration of having health for longer, or being able to maybe look a bit better, or cycle a bit harder, or work with more energy, or other things. But the I'm very, very positive about what's happened. I think the word longevity, by the way, even though there is absolutely no evidence for about another 50 years that we are actually going to increase people's longevity. We know that we can increase the amount people can do and before the day they die, and that I'm very confident of, the health span aspect. But the word longevity is hyper aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I think that some of the ultra longevity, extreme longevity stuff, which is uh, very highly popularized, very highly commercialized, um, has a massive bullshit factor around it, and also only because we see this, because we're the guys that pick up the pieces often. It's like there's some dangers in there,
Are
clearly.
there any specific warnings that you would feel comfortable issuing?
Well, it depends. I mean,
Like,
there's a whole book to write on what specific things to be warned about. But in general, um, there there is genuine fear from that side of the market, from the sort of the ultra longevity side. There's a fear of dying. People don't want to die. They think that they're doing it because they want to live for a long time, but the actual driver is they don't want it to end. It's a fear of it ending,
mm-hmm,
which is very different from the performance side of things, which is a kind of not laissez-faire, but a kind of a realization that life is finite, or if it isn't finite, if it is infinite, there's an only an infinitely small chance of it being infinite. So
yeah.
effectively, it's kind of finite, and people want to live for the day, achieve what they want, get their bucket list done, live purposefully, and be as strong and good as they possibly can for them, their work, their kids, their family, their goals, and that's more the healthy end. There is a genuine fear in a growing number of people that it's not okay to die, and at all costs, you should avoid dying. I don't think that's going away either. I think the marketing around what you can do about it is going up and up. The fear is
Mm-hmm,
the same, maybe worse, and so the sort of don't die, being quite specific about the words there, movement will be here for a long time, but it's based on longevity neurosis, not on health span aspiration.
mm-hmm.
I do genuinely feel that health span aspiration has also come about, and the vast majority of the people that we work with have aspirations for fantastic health span, not fear of dying.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? The aspiration to health span and how can we encourage it to also decrease the pressure on public healthcare systems? Because I see two forces. On the one hand, the awareness that you do need, that it's possible to be fit regardless of aging. That's one thing. But it also requires a lot of effort if you do want to do that. You have to be mindful of several things. And we are living in the time of consumerism where services and solutions are working against that. We've
Of course.
got scooters, we've got electric bikes, so you can move less. You've got the escalators, so you don't have to walk the stairs. So it's there's a lot of very attractive things to
To
buy or to
distract you.
use.
Attractive to distract you. Exactly.
Exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
how, like, if you tried to combine all these forces, how do you see? You can also maybe talk about the experiences that you see if you had any people that were extremely unfit and what motivated them to start working on themselves, to prioritize the
I
time
know.
for exercise, the mental load that is required to be mindful of all the factors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are most most living beings try to optimize for energy consumption. And this sounds like a really weird way of starting the answer to this question, okay? But um, if it took you 1 gram of energy to achieve X, why use three? Why use four? There are limited resources out there, right? There's limited food, there's limited things. We're lazy. I mean, we're born to move. We're born to um, hunt for our food, to build things, to protect ourselves, to move our bodies. But we were also born to do that with the absolute minimum of energy consumption. Okay. So unless you are under the stress of physically having to move, you kind of won't, or at least you
Hmm.
don't really want to.
You know, it's I just saw a meme 2 days ago that said, um, being a morning person as a parent is the same way as saying you're a runner because a bear is after you, or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. But the we're forced to do certain things, and then but somehow or other, some of us are wired to just be in love with certain activities and things like that. So why does a climber just love climbing? You can just sit around and be at ground level. Why does a climber climb? Why does a runner run? Why does an entrepreneur build stuff when they could probably, rationally speaking, they could earn more money just joining a big company? Let's face it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So there is a switch inside of us, which is actually a childhood switch. It's that kind of boundless energy that children have. They jump at the opportunity of going on a trampoline. They desperately want to run around. They want to create. They want to build, and uh, finding that kind of playfulness, that youthfulness, that thing that you had when you were a child, is really important to motivate people. That's part of that is physiological energy, which is having great hormonal health and getting people fit enough so that they actually like the feeling of keeping fit. And Also just kind of inspiring people. I guess this is less about like prescribing medicine, but kind of prescribing adventure, like getting people out into environments where they actually go, oh my God, this is hard work. But the the whole immersion and the feeling that you get from being in those incredible environments, it's both healing and inspiring, and it just makes you want to do more and bring other people along to do it with as well next time. So that's maybe a slightly obtuse answer to your question. More practically speaking, um, you know we do nothing in terms of planning our towns to encourage cycling, for instance. The industry of food makes it easier for us to eat hyper addictive, highly metabolically damaging, overloading foods that don't make us full very quickly, but are cheaper than all the other good alternatives, um, but taste great and are highly addictive. Public sort of policy stuff has always lagged behind the power of marketing, and that is just reality, and uh, super bright people, as well as people who've not been blessed with a great education, are just as much victims of this kind of uh, addiction science and marketing science as anyone else. It's just life. It's either take away everyone's freedom, become the Borg, or steer policy in a good way, or inspire people in other ways. Regulation, another way of doing it, but always hard. So, I think we'll see people change, because they're actually seeing other people change. COVID, as I said, this nexus for health that happened in COVID was not expected, but it was real. It still remains even years after. I don't see it shrinking, in fact. And I think when people start to feel enormously empowered by the feeling of better health, the genuine shift in how you look, and how you look physically, and how you look at life when you can do physical pursuits and adventures and build things and so forth with good energy. Waking up in the morning with wanting to do stuff rather than dreading to do stuff. All of these things are virtuous cycles, and I hope that we'll see health become the new pub. I very much I very much feel that health is becoming the new pub. I mean, the number of people that are not drinking now, by the way, is remarkable. Um, that
Yeah,
might be another reflection of it, is that people are beginning to realize these things. The people
yeah.
that need this the most are still the most disenfranchised and the least educated about it, and the ones who can't afford it. But it's
Mm-hmm.
got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
And I'd rather see an economy of excessive health first, then become moderated, rather than
yeah.
excessive, consumption and just bad stuff for you, eventually trying to claw its way into people's purchasing choices. So I think we're in a right path. There was one other thing which I think we mustn't forget, which is huge. Last year, remember at our Leaders in Health conference, we talked about GLP-1s. GLP-1s, those, you know, things that fat jabs, as people call them. 40 years ago, these things were discovered, near enough, 39 years ago. Um, it's taken a long while to get there, but because of this sort of like self-prescribing, damn, I'm going to take health into my own hands mentality that we've got now, for the first time ever, we've seen a pharmaceutical agent built for diseases being used as it's not a recreational drug, but I call it a recreational drug,
Mm-hmm.
to recreate your um, physiology and what you looked like before the food industry destroyed those two bits of your gut. It's like gut hormone replacement therapy. And I'm very critical of most drugs, but this is a phenomenal breakthrough, which, because it just stops you from overwhelming your system with too much fuel, is having untold benefits over and above just losing weight. And people who have never felt the energy or the ability to actually get rid of those critical kilos are now able to. And whilst it's not perfect, and it's probably a permanent fixture, actually, if you start taking it, probably,
Mm-hmm.
um, it is undoing so much of what big food and bad town planning has done. Um, and I think it's literally going to be the most important thing since uh, vaccines, antibiotics, and yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's huge. I think it's huge.
Um, Unless the food industry adapts
Oh, that's
to
true.
it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. They may create anti GLP GIP drugs. That is food. Sorry, yeah, that's yeah. But like it's super funny thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the little graph that I managed to pull off the stock market ticker things from some of the big food tickers like General Mills and Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. And literally, as the sales for GLP-1s went up, the stocks for there was a 3 month lag, but the stocks for big food just started plummeting. People just not eating as much.
Yeah, yeah, which is good. Um, Given that there's a huge impact of technology on the trends that we discussed, you also use a lot of diagnostics, apps, and more in your work and in your programs. Um, what advice would you give, or um, how can people get reliable information if they track their health? I think we've moved from the era of gathering data to the data interpretation era,
Yeah,
where
using.
also the apps that you use for wearables are trying to let you know what to do with the data, which was a huge issue before. But still, you as someone that is an expert in data interpretation of human performance, how would you advise that people try to get actionable insight if they gather data?
You can have no data and be an ostrich, or you can be an eagle that's always looking and have all the data you want, but still never have all the data that you'd ever truly need to know exactly what was going on. You'd have to live your life just testing the whole time. And some people do, by the way, but they don't do anything else at all. And in the middle, there's a kind of a wise old owl. I guess that the first lot are ostriches, who basically head in the sand. They're very happy to just let be, and the eagles are there on the other side, and the wise old owls, I guess, are those who intuitively feel what's going on inside them as well, because they've gathered enough data, whether it's from a device or blood work or just the way they feel and knowing how that maps to the way their skin looks, vitality and so forth. But you need to keep looking. It just depends on the cadence. The the ostrich is sort of like, I don't want to know, I don't want to know, I don't want to know. Something happens. Oh, I want to know. the the eagle is up here, kind of like, I want to know, I don't know, I know. And then like at some point just goes, oh my god, it's enough. I just or I've made a mistake because I interpreted the data wrong. And then in the middle you got that kind of beautiful cadence, and that's where you need to get to. How you do that, I've got to say, the power of totally free AI tools now for consumer wellness side of things rather than sort of like professional clinical stuff, it's so outstanding. You can literally dump PDFs and graphs and notes straight into a free thing that can give you, again, it's non-insurable. It's kind of like the GPT will go, don't sue me if you end up following my advice wrongly, or I'm misinterpreting this, but it's outstanding. It really, really is. And we professionally see see the edge cases and the nuance and all of that kind of stuff. But like for the average case, it's absolutely awesome. And so, if you were asking me this question like 3 years ago, I'd go, well, you got to come to folk like us, like a geeky team of scientists and physicians that like love looking at data, and we'll figure it out for you. But now, unless you're really kind of like our patients, maybe seriously into this stuff, and you need a sounding board, you don't need professionals so much anymore. Now, if you've got medical underlying issues, then that whole argument changes. I agree. And you need to kind of intersect the wellness data with the canonical laboratory stuff, which really is telling you whether something's going badly right or badly wrong. So did I say badly right? I don't think there is a badly right, is there? But if something's going incredibly well, and then you need to kind of understand um, why that is, and then but seriously, the game is changing, and it will change every single week, every single month, and dramatic changes in your ability to interpret data will happen. The what to measure, I mean, classically, people will measure blood tests, they'll do kind of proxies of VO2, they'll do all this stuff in their Oura rings, their whoops, they'll do a bunch of things. There are great services now in America. You've got Function. They're even introducing cheap MRIs now. They bought Ezra. You can basically do anything you like without having a doctor prescribe it. And by the way, most doctors don't know how to interpret half this stuff anyway, because they're not physiologists. They're literally drowning in
Yeah.
illness and pathology stuff. I'm
Hmm.
not used to looking at performance data. But yeah, I mean, maybe I'm out of a job. Uh,
I
Maybe I'm
don't
out of a
think
job.
so. After all, you do also organize trips to extreme environments. I was just making lunch before and I was thinking, what do you eat if you go to the North Pole? Is it just energy bars? Like, how do you optimize for that?
Yeah. Well, you're definitely not in fat burning mode. You're in full sugar burning mode a lot of the time.
Mm,
So, there's sort of this idea that you can be keto when you're kind of dragging a 70 kilogram sled kind of uphill at equivalent of 3,500 meters altitude at minus 40 degrees centigrade, which is also Fahrenheit, by the way, and just get away with a bit of skipping breakfast. It doesn't work. It is stuffing yourself religiously every hour with a few hundred calories you can possibly, get down your mouth that isn't frozen solid. That,
Yeah.
it's tough. But that's not the real. That is definitely not the real world. But it's a fun question. The dehydrated food, which is essentially what astronauts eat, is
Hmm.
absolutely extraordinary. It's really really cool, and it is very very well balanced food, both breakfasty kind of food and then main meal type foods. Just like fabulously freeze dried, vacuum packed. You just add water, and people who have never cooked in their lives. And believe me, in the last 2 years, 3 years, sorry, I've met two people who have never cooked in their lives. Literally. They've never made a cup of soup, but I've witnessed them making for the first time, pouring hot water into an apocalypse food pouch, wait for it, and enjoy every mouthful. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
can imagine. I can imagine. Um, Perhaps just one last question. Since we discussed a lot of things related to physiology, we mentioned longevity as the field fueled by the fear from death. We were both at Next Med Health this year, where health span and longevity were big topics. And what I thought was really interesting was not the focus on the importance of mental health, but the importance of human connection. And I would even say that the human connection could be a social determinant of health. Um, any thoughts there? What are your observations in that regard? Um,
we have an incredibly primitive view of what a being is, a living being. Um, even even apex predators who live alone, apart from when they mate, are still hyper connected to all the things around them. The quality of the water they swim in, the strength of the various frequencies of light from the sun. Um, we are kind of connected things. We don't live in a vacuum for sure. And we know this even, to do with the bugs in our gut. That is a you could say that's a social determinant of health. You've got colonies of other beings that are codependent with you and help you and so forth. Human connection is especially important because we are not apex predators that just sit around on our own. We only became us because of deep, deep social interactions. Kids who are absent from another human's chest, another human's electrical field around the heartbeat, etc. They don't regulate their heartbeat so well. They can actually cause fatalities in newborns, right through to the massive difference that laying on a compassionate hand on a person's shoulder on in a palliative care center, and how much of a difference that makes to a person's both how they feel but also how they pass.
mm,
um, and everything in between, from the moment you started being gestated to the moment you take your last breath, is a connected social interaction, if you want. Um, I actually think there's something even more than that. Sounds spooky. I'm not a Reiki expert or anything, but I I do recognize some of the brilliant work of Michael Levin, for instance, at Tufts, looking at actual non-neural networks and biological, bioelectric fields, non-neural networks in nature. And I think that those things interact with your mind, and you're almost in real time telling your body what to be, what it's meant to do, and your body's telling you how it's feeling and what's going on. And that is a collective thing that happens amongst humans. So your care network strength and your social flexibility is just as important as your grip strength and your metabolic flexibility.
Mm. And
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in that.
it's it sounds as a field that we still need to research a lot. It's hard to
Yeah,
quantify,
yeah, it is.
and we love to quantify things
Yeah, that's
to
true.
understand the world.
But the world's not just made up of atoms; it's made up of stories.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think there's going to be a whole area of science. I think it's quite closely related actually to a lot of the work that's going into psychedelic medical research as well at the minute, which is kind of breaking down the self and the sort of concept that we're just this like single thing. Uh,
Hmm.
we'll see, but yeah, I think I'm with you on this.
Yeah. Well, Jack, thank you so much for your time today and for this discussion, where I feel that we've opened up maybe more questions that we closed, but that's just the reality, I guess, of science. It continuously evolves, and the more we know, the less we know. The less we know, we know.
The less we know, we know. Absolutely. It's been a very great pleasure. Thank you for having me.